Hello, welcome to More Faith with Kisha. My first name is Kisha and my last name is Moore. And on this channel, we talk all things, most things, faith. I love to give my faith testimonies to motivate, inspire, and to encourage you to keep the faith in your goals, your dreams, your aspirations, and most importantly, to keep your faith in God. In the name of Jesus. So today, I want to talk about not always getting the same opportunity twice. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we feel like God is telling us to do something and then we don't do it and we miss out on an opportunity. But something else comes around and in our mind, we're like, oh, God gave us another opportunity. That's not always the case. Sometimes when God is telling you to do something, He's telling you to do it because you're in a particular season and there's a timeline for whatever it is that He's telling you to manifest and to happen. And if you don't do it when He tells you to do it, you may not get that same opportunity. Yes, you will get another opportunity, but you may not get the same opportunity. And sometimes people miss out on blessings because they procrastinate and they don't do things when God is telling them to do it. So there was a season in my life, as if you don't know, I used to bake and I had a baking business. It was like a cake business. I baked cupcakes, cakes, cookies, things of that sort. And it was called Create Your Own Cake Bakery. Now, I had the dream as a child of one day being on the Food Network. Like that was my dream. That was my goal. Like I always wanted to be on the Food Network. I used to cook growing up, but I wasn't like a baker, but I used to cook. I learned to cook from my grandma, but I wasn't, like baking or anything. And then one day I was at work. This is when I was working at Sears Marketing Center. I was sitting down in a cubicle and the computers shut down at work. And God told me, I want you to start a baking business. Now, for you that are bakers, that may have seemed like something like, oh my gosh, God wanted me to start baking. The thing is, I was not a baker. I was a cook. I knew how to cook, but I wasn't a baker. But it was just something about what I know God was telling me, spoke to my spirit, it spoke to my heart. Now, when the computers went down at work, typically, they would not send us home early. They will make us wait because it was a call center. They will make us wait until the techs get everything back up and running. But this time was different. They told us to go home early. I went home and I was married at the time. I told my husband, I was like, I'm going to start baking. And he was like right on board. And usually he was never the type of person to be on board with everything. Well, let's pray about it. Let's do this and that, but he was like right on board. And so God told me to bake. I wrote down a list of everything that I would need to start a baking business. Okay, what's the name? I need a logo. I need a website. I need pictures. I need a business license. I just wrote down a list of everything that I needed to start the baking business. And there was a cookbook that we had in the house, and there was a few recipes. And I remember I was trying to make like chocolate chip cookies, and I'm looking at the recipe and I'm making it, but every time I made the cookies, they would come out like muffins. Keep in mind, I was a cook, I was not a baker. So I'm looking at the recipe, I'm like, okay, what is it that I'm doing wrong? And the recipe required baking soda. I was putting baking powder. In my mind, I'm like, it's both bacon, it's both white, it's the same thing. But it doesn't work that way when it comes to baking. When you use baking powder, everything blows up, it expands like a cake. When you use baking soda, not so much. So I made the recipe like 3 times and I did not understand what I was doing wrong. I prayed. I was like, God, show me what it is that I'm doing wrong. And then my eyes were open. And then I said, oh, the recipe requires baking soda, not baking powder. So the next time I made the cookies, they came out perfect. Stay with me. I know it seems like I'm kind of all over the place, but stay with me. So God told me what I was doing wrong, and He started to teach me one-on-one how to bake. Within 2 weeks of me baking those cookies that was originally turning into muffins or looking like muffins, I was making cupcakes, cookies, basically creating recipes from scratch. without using any cookbooks. This was within 2 weeks, right? Because I did it the way God told me to do it, and I did it when God was telling me to do it. Little did I know that God was using this to make my dream of being on the Food Network come to pass. It would have made sense in the natural for me to start a cooking business because I was a natural cook. It did not make sense to start a baking business because I was not a baker. So sometimes God will tell you to do things that are not aligned with what it is that's going on in your life, that is not aligned with not aligned with like your natural ability, but he's expanding your knowledge of things. He's showing you how to do something different because he has something in mind. So when God is telling you to do something and you know it's God, even if it doesn't make sense, just do it because there's a reason he's telling you to do it. You don't always need the approval of others. As long as you know God is telling you to do it, just do it. So again, stay with me. You don't always get the same opportunity twice. So now I'm baking from scratch within 2 weeks. I start the baking business. I'm getting orders. Everything's going good. There was a lady at work when I was still working at Sears Marketing Center. There was a lady at work named Gladys, and she was always like, you should be on Cupcake Wars. You should be on Cupcake Wars. I didn't know what Cupcake Wars was because I wasn't even watching TV, and anything with the word wars on it, I was like, I don't want to be on no Cupcake Wars because I'm not about to be on TV and no drama or whatever. I had no idea what it was, but I was rejecting it and I was shutting it down. I didn't even inquire. One day I was at home, and I just felt the nudge to apply for a show, Cupcake Wars, that I'd never even seen an episode. No lie, never seen an episode. I didn't have internet. Times was hard. So I took my laptop, I went to Starbucks, looked up Cupcake Wars season 3. I applied immediately. I get an email back telling me that they are not casting for season 3 of Cupcake Wars. I was like, you know what? I didn't really want to be on the show anyway. Little do I know, God was using that as an opportunity to bless me with my dream. 1 month later, I'm at work. I'm leaving work. I check my voicemail. This is when we check voicemails. This was like 10 years ago. I know now we don't check voicemails, but I checked my voicemail. And in the voicemail, I heard a voice, and it said, hi, Kisha, this is so-and-so from Cupcake Wars. We're casting for season 4, and we want you to audition for the show. I never applied for season 4. I applied for season 3, which they said they were no longer casting for season 3. At that moment, I got so excited. I was like, oh my gosh. And I called the guy back. And I'm just super hyped, it was just something in me all of a sudden wanted to be on the show. And I'm talking to the guy on the phone who was casting, and he was like, that energy, that's what we want. You keep that. So they wanted somebody that was hyped. So I was hyped. And I was like, oh my gosh. But I just knew that I was going to be cast on that show, and I was going to be on the Food Network. So he told me what to do, to upload a video on YouTube, a 3-minute video, like an audition tape, showing my personality, my baking skills, all these, telling my story. So I did that. I uploaded the video, and then he said that I would hear back within 2 weeks. And then here's the thing, guys. Sometimes when you don't hear back right away or the way you want to, don't get discouraged. Sometimes it's a longer process, and you don't know what God is doing in the background. So he told me that I would hear back in 2 weeks. I didn't hear back in 2 weeks. It was like a month. But me, taking the initiative, I was calling every week, every few days, like, hey, I haven't heard back. But every time I would call, I didn't know it was like a whole process of casting before you even get to the audition to be on the show. Like, this was just the beginning stages. But every time I called, my video was further and further in the process. And I was hopeful. I was positive. And I remember one of my cousins, he was like, yeah, if you don't get cast for the show, don't tell that's the reason you cannot tell everyone everything, because they don't mean harm. They mean well because they want to protect you, protect your heart. But that could have been a negative seed of doubt sowed in my mind had I let it be. But I did not. I just cut off what he said about don't get discouraged if I don't, because I knew that I was going to be cast on that show. A month later, I remember I called first and I was like, where's my video? The guy told me, who was the casting director, he was like, your video has made it to the Food Network. So I filtered out all through that process, all the other auditioners, contestants who wanted to be on the show. And now my video, my audition tape was at the Food Network. And I was like, wow, they're watching me. And it's such a funny audition tape. If I find it, I can upload it here one day so you guys can watch it. And then one day I receive a call. It was a 323 area code. And once I saw that area code, I knew. I was like, this is them giving me a call, telling me that I made it to the show. So I get the call and they were like, Kisha, you have now been cast for season 4 of Food Network's Cupcake Wars. And I remember I was at the car dealership signing my lease and I was like, I was just cast on the show. He was like, don't tell anybody. I was like, never mind, I'm joking. And it was just like God was just blessing me because it was a hard season in my life. Like I needed a car, I needed a place to stay. It was just so much going on behind the scenes. But I didn't focus on any of that. I focused on what it is God was showing me. And at that moment, he was going to make my dream come true. I was going to be on the Food Network. As a child, I always had that desire. I thought it was going to come through one way, which would be cooking. But that's not the way God did it. He gave it to me through a different way. I was still there. So now let me just backtrack a little bit, get back on track. So I had to prepare to be on the show. And to make a long story short, I remember being there in the studio and my heart was so overjoyed and I felt so much the love of God. It's like God remembers dreams. He remembered the desire that I had as a little girl. And I'm in the studio and I'm having a heart to heart with God, not through my words, not on my knees praying, but it was just like, because God knows everything. So I'm just having a conversation with God in my head and I'm looking around. I was like, God, like I'm here. Like you remember. And I was so grateful and I was so happy. Now, once the show started to air, I was eliminated on the first round. So, but it was okay because within 6 months of God telling me to bake, I was now on one of the #1 shows on the Food Network. So I was still new compared to everyone else. Now, back to the beginning when I said you don't always get the same opportunity twice. If I had not moved when God told me to move, if I had not initiated starting the business when God told me to do it, I would have missed out on the opportunity. Because guess what? The Food Network, not the Food Network, Cupcake Wars, that show no longer exists. I mean, you can see like reruns or something like that, but that show no longer airs. Like that was like years ago. So don't always think that you're going to get the same opportunity twice. When God is telling you to do something, you do it when he is telling you to do it, how he's telling you to do it, and do it immediately. You don't always have to tell everyone around you. Everyone doesn't have to understand what it is he's telling you to do. It doesn't have to make sense. Nothing about what happened made sense in the natural. It didn't make sense for the computers to shut down and me to say, God told me to bake. Somebody could tell me, oh, you didn't hear from God, but I did. It didn't make sense for me to randomly go to Starbucks and apply for a show that I had never even seen because I thought it was something toxic and it wasn't. It didn't make sense for me to be cast when I was only baking for like a few months. None of that makes sense in the natural, but the spiritual is something different. God sees and knows what we don't. And he wants your dreams. He wants your desires to come true. But sometimes we procrastinate and we wait because we want to have it all figured out. And we miss out on the opportunity. And we may not get the same opportunity twice. Had I not did what God told me to do, I would not have gotten that opportunity. The Food Network still airs, so I could have received another opportunity, but not that opportunity. Because you don't always get the same opportunity twice. Yes, God is gracious. Yes, he's forgiving. Yes, he's patient. But sometimes you do not get the same opportunity twice. So I want to just encourage you to move the way God is telling you to move and to do what he's telling you to do, because you may not get the same opportunity twice. Don't miss out on an opportunity because you procrastinated. All right? Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Bye.